Chapter 5, Lecture 2. So once we realize the importance of the early environment for the child's cognitive development, we come to the program called early intervention. The concept of early intervention is providing systematic services to young children from birth through age 3 to meet their developmental needs. This is related to the legislation called IDEA, Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, which means children who have diagnoses of developmental disorders or other conditions which may impede their learning are identified early and provided services by law. And so before even children go to school, they receive early intervention. So two projects examined the effect of early intervention. And these two projects actually didn't focus on children who had diagnoses of medical or other developmental conditions. These two projects actually looked at children who were at risk because of coming from poorer socioeconomic or more deprived backgrounds. These two programs, the first is Project CARE and the second is the ABCDarian Project. And it was based in North Carolina actually. And in these projects, they took 174 babies from at-risk homes and started from the age of about 6 weeks until kindergarten. And this group was enrolled in Partners for Learning, a full-day, year-round preschool early care, not even preschool, an early child care kind of program, which was very, very enriched, and it was all around. Children received pediatric care, social work, they received nutrition and formula, and home visits. The control group were not enrolled in this enriched program. The control group just was received just their regular child care as they would have. Otherwise, they did not receive all these enriched services. So the results of the developmental outcomes for the experimental group and control group were then compared. And because the children were all from the same type of background, we can say that the type of background would not have made an effect on the results. It was just that particular intervention, this early intervention that they received, would have shaped the results. Studies found that children who were enrolled in the intervention had a 10 to 15 point higher IQ at age 3 compared to the control group. They had an IQ of about 100 to 101. This is an IQ in the normal range. And the children in the control group had an IQ of about 84 to 93, which is almost below normal range. The normal range of IQ in a regular IQ scale is from 85 to 115. So anything below 85 is considered a little less than normal, and numbers at the lower end of the range are, they're cognitively slower. These early advantages in IQ were not really maintained. This gap was really not maintained in subsequent years, largely because that highly enriched support was no longer maintained. The children were placed in regular classrooms and they just did the same as everybody else. But the children who had received the intervention, their scores did remain a little higher and more stable much later, and they showed several other benefits. They were less likely to have to repeat a grade. They were less likely to need special education. At the age of 21, 70% of the experimental group children were in higher education or they had stable jobs. Only 40% of the control group were in this advantage. The experimental group children were less likely to smoke, use drugs, or have a teen pregnancy compared to the control group children. So the lessons we learn from this is that early interventions are very effective, and the money that you spend upfront on early intervention, you save a lot of money later down the road in terms of children with better education, more stable jobs, without problem behaviors. The best interventions start early as 6 weeks, continue throughout preschool. They are time intensive, they are educational, and they are all round wraparound services. They include health and family counseling and social services, and they're tailored to individual children's differences and needs. So early intervention is a very powerful tool to improve children's learning and all their other domains of life. Now we turn to the Piagetian approach. When Piaget studied infants and children, how they learn, he said infants learn through the joint development of sensory and motor abilities. Over the next couple of pages, you will see a lot of information and detail on this approach, and it's less necessary for you. The main things you need to learn are the vocabulary meaning schemes, circular reactions, and representational ability. You have a large table, that is table 5-2, with the 6 sub-stage of sensory motor development. You do not need to learn the details of this. It's just there for your information. So let's look at what these terms mean. As you may recall from an earlier chapter, schemes is Piaget's term for the organized patterns of thought that are used in particular situations once children learn to once children start learning. So schemes are your organized mental thoughts and representations. A circular reaction is Piaget's term for processes by which an infant learns to reproduce something that they discovered by chance, but then they start doing it deliberately because they were happy with the result. For example, the baby sucks their thumb and they figure out that they like to suck. I mean, they suck for milk, then they learn to suck their thumb, then they put things into their mouth. So they keep repeating extensions of the same behavior which they learned are pleasurable for them. Again, baby makes some cute sounds, the baby sees a smiling face, the baby keeps making more and more sounds. Then the baby, when they're walking, they step on a ducky and it makes a squeaky sound, and then they learn to squeeze it. So things that they discover by chance that they enjoy, they repeat it to deliberately get that reaction. And that is a circular reaction. And the final concept to learn here is the idea of representational ability. And this idea of representational ability comes far down on the chart of the circular reaction stage. The representational ability is the 6th substage. It is Piaget's term for the capacity of people to store mental images or symbols of objects and events. So to repeat, representational ability is all humans' ability to store mental images of objects or events or ideas or pictures or anything. And as you might imagine, this is a key cognitive advance. It paves the way for all the learning that comes afterwards. You cannot read, you cannot do math, you cannot read a map, you cannot look at a picture or understand it. You cannot do any of these things without having representational ability. So to repeat, when we introduced to the Piagetian approach of cognitive development in young children, we need to understand the terms schemes, circular reactions, and representational ability. These terms are defined for you in the margins of your textbook, and you do not have to go into a whole lot more detail than that. Piaget conducted experiments to understand how children learned through imitation. And he basically said that first children learn visible imitation, like you'd copy somebody who's like waving bye-bye or something, and then you would learn invisible imitation, that using parts of the body you cannot see. So somebody will stick out their tongue and the baby sticks out their tongue back. They cannot see their own tongue, so that's invisible imitation. But recent researchers realized that children learn much sooner than Piaget had thought, because Piaget's research methods were a little not really suited to young infants. They were a little more advanced, and if you use research methods that are more suitable to young infants, then you see that they're actually learning how to imitate at a much earlier age than Piaget had realized. Piaget also talked about deferred imitation, that is imitation after some time, because they don't do it right away. That he said children under the age of 18 months can't like wait for some time and then imitate, but they do it. We know now that they do that sooner. And there's also the elicited information, that is imitation based just on a description, not on actually seeing and copying somebody else. So these are the 4 types of imitation that children use as the basis for learning.